Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I have to connect through my mobile, so let's hope that it survives. Okay, are there questions?
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
sir, if in a reaction like beta decay, if L equals to 0, lepton number is 0, sir, that means the L is conserved.
Yeah, if the total lepton number of the final leptons is 0, then that means lepton number is conserved because the nucleus don't carry lepton number.
Okay.
Right? So that means that if n goes to n prime plus a set of leptons, okay, and photon maybe, and if the
Okay.
total final state has 0 lepton number, then n is conserved.
Total L.
Yeah, total L carried by the final state particles. Right?
Okay.
For example, it's a electron and antineutrino. Then the total lepton number is 0 because electron carries lepton number 1 and antineutrino carries lepton number -1.
Yes, sir.
But if it's like 2 electrons, then you know that the lepton number is violated by 2. Right? Similarly, if it's 2 positrons, then again lepton number is violated by 2.
Okay. Okay, sir. Sir, lepton number violation is actually occur at a high energy or low energy. Matlab, high.
Well, it happens at all energies, right?
Okay.
Is there a low energy lepton number violation? I mean, okay, we don't know if it's violated or not, right? In the particular model that I described, the lepton number is violated.
Okay.
That's this using the seesaw mechanism.
Yes, sir.
And if it's if that model is true, then it's violated, of course, at high energy. Okay, but it's also violated at low energy, which is not useful for cosmology, for producing B minus L in cosmology, or producing baryon number in cosmology. Let me put it that way. But it is useful, meaning it has observable consequences, right? Like neutronal double beta decay that we described, where a nucleus goes to another nucleus plus 2 electrons or 2 positrons. So those kinds of decays will basically show that the lepton number is violated.
Okay.
So far, we haven't seen that. Right? But that's a test that if you have neutronal double beta decay, then that means lepton number must be violated.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Okay, so yesterday there was a question, so let me start with that. So this question was about the homework. Okay. Can a decoupled particle have T larger than the CMB temperature? And this is not possible. Not possible if the decoupled particle here you are talking about massless particle was in thermal equilibrium with ordinary matter just before decoupling. Okay. And the reason is clear because if it decouples and at that time it was in thermal equilibrium, then after this the photon temperature can keep increasing, okay, as more and more particles go non-relativistic. Okay. But the temperature of the decoupled particle, of course, falls off as 1 over lambda. Okay, and that's why the photon temperature will be larger than the temperature of the decoupled particle. Okay. But in high energy physics, we can have more complicated scenarios. Okay, so I'll describe one such scenario. So one such scenario is that there could be a hidden sector. That decouples from ordinary sector. Okay, so ordinary sector contains all the particles that you know. But the decoupled sector need not be just one particle. Okay, it can be a whole set of particles which interact among themselves. Okay. Those interactions need not go out of equilibrium, so those interactions may be strong. Okay. But it's called hidden sector because the interaction between that sector of particles and the sector that we see, okay, the ordinary sector, that interaction may be weak. And that means that the whole hidden sector and the ordinary sector will fall out of equilibrium with respect to each other. Okay, even though the hidden sector can have its own equilibrium, okay, ordinary sector will have its own equilibrium. And indeed, after this decoupling happens, each of them will continue to evolve with the same temperature because the temperature will continue to fall as 1 over lambda. But as time evolves, some particles in the hidden sector we call non-relativistic. And as it happens, it will raise the temperature of the light particles. And then the same may, of course, also happen in the ordinary sector. So the result is that the hidden sector temperature keeps going up, ordinary sector temperature keeps going up, and how much they go up depends on how many particles are there in the hidden sector relative to how many particles are there in the ordinary sector. Right? How many particles have gone non-relativistic at any given time. So in particular, if there are a lot of particles in the hidden sector which goes non-relativistic, there are large number of then its temperature may be raised So in other words, okay, that homework problem, I think that temperature that are the decoupling temperature was given as 10 to the 6 GeV. And so it could happen that by 10 to the 6 GeV, okay, the temperature of the hidden sector has gone way above the temperature of the observable sector. So after that particle decouples, then of course its temperature gets frozen to 1 over lambda dependence. But it may already be so high that even though the temperature of the photon is raised many times after that, because a lot of particles go non-relativistic, right? Starting with the Higgs, W plus minus, and then all the other particles. Even then, it could happen that the hidden sector particle, the light particle, has an temperature larger than the CMB temperature. So that's the kind of scenario in which it may happen. Okay, and this is not very esoteric model, and very high energy physics models have this feature. Okay, and the hidden sector there, of course, is not introduced just for this. Okay, because as far as you know, there is no need to have this high temperature particle. Okay, but the hidden sector is used for other purposes, okay, for different for achieving different goals. But once you have introduced a hidden sector, then you have to basically follow what happens there. Is this clear? Are there questions?
So are you saying there are two different baths?
Yes, if it happens, there may be two different paths.
Like
They're all mixed up, but they don't exchange energy, right? That's why we have like two different paths.
So the other massless particle does not interact with our matter, nor the photon interacts with the hidden sector.
Yeah, so other massless particles was interacting with the hidden sector earlier.
Yeah.
But once it decouples, then of course it stops interacting with the hidden sector also.
Yeah, like hidden sector does not interact with photon also, right?
Exactly, yeah. So there is no interaction between the ordinary sector and the hidden sector below that scale, right? Of course, gravitational interaction is always there, but that's too weak, right? That doesn't exchange energy efficiently.
So the only commonality is the expansion of universe that like it relates.
Exactly, that relates the temperatures. Right? So each would have its own jump. So the point is, given the hidden sector, okay, if somebody gives a microscopic model of the hidden sector, you can calculate how much the temperature would be, right? Because you know precisely when a given particle will decouple, or when a given particle will go non-relativistic. And by following that, you can follow the history in the hidden sector, okay, and follow the hidden history in the observable sector. Okay. And they are, of course, connected at a temperature where they are in thermal equilibrium, where the exchange of energy was big enough. And that way you can relate the temperatures in the hidden sector to the temperatures in the observable sector, or the temperature of every particle that decouples in the hidden sector to the temperature of CMB. But it requires doing the calculation on both sides. On the just like in the ordinary sector, you have to see what particles go non-relativistic and how much its temperature is, how much the CMB temperature is raised. You have to do the same calculus on the hidden sector. So this is really like having two baths. Okay. Normally, two baths means you think of them as separated in space. Here, they are not separated. They are all intermixed. Okay. Nevertheless, they behave like two baths simply because the particles don't interact with each other. Is that clear?
Can principally dark matter particles be of this sort of a nature?
Yeah, it could be, right? So, I mean, I'll be discussing dark matter particles, right? I mean, I'll calculate. I'll show how to calculate dark matter abundance, assuming that it decoupled, that just before decoupling it was in equilibrium. But of course, dark matter particle can be of this kind also, right? Which is part of a hidden sector, right? Which means the dark matter particle may have decoupled eventually, but that decoupling may happen much later than the hidden sector decoupled from the ordinary sector.
Okay.
So it can certainly happen. Any other question?
So when people talk about sterile neutrinos,
Yes,
those neutrinos, do they belong to the sector?
they could. They could, except that normally when you think of sterile neutrinos, you think of singlets, SU2 singlets, but they have interaction. I mean, of the order of weak interaction with the standard matter. So they don't decouple that early. But you can certainly, I mean, you can also use it in a more general sense, right? Any light particle, if you are thinking in terms of cosmology, right? And if you are thinking in terms of its consequences today, okay, in cosmology, then sterile neutrino can include anything. Anything that has decoupled, because all of them will affect the Big Bang nucleosynthesis, right? Because any extra particle is going to make the expansion of the universe faster, okay, and hence it will affect Big Bang nucleosynthesis. On the other hand, if you are thinking of from a particle physics viewpoint, right, whether you can actually observe sterile neutrinos in particle physics experiment, then of course, if it's of this kind, then you are not going to observe it, right? Because then they are so weakly coupled that you'll never produce them. So normally in the particle physics language, when people talk about sterile neutrinos, they are not of this kind. They interact with weak interaction strength, right? Even though it's not standard model weak interaction. It's not SU3 times SU2 times C1. Okay, it may be some other interaction, some other exchange of particle. Okay, but roughly of the same mass, like 100 GeV mass, as the standard model particles.
Sir, we can say the right-handed neutrino is sterile.
Well, right-handed neutrino, the point is, yeah, it's sterile, of course. Okay. But normally when people talk about sterile, it's usually in the context of light sterile particles. If you use the seesaw mechanism, for example, then the extra particle that you add becomes very heavy, right? So then, I mean, it's not really observable in the at low energy. On the other hand, if you don't use seesaw mechanism, if you don't add this extra Mar and a mass term, then the right-handed neutrinos are indeed sterile neutrinos. Okay, that if we just add this lambda times, you remember we added this lambda ij times the Higgs with two right-handed and left-handed neutrinos. So that kind of coupling, right? In order to make the ordinary neutrinos light, you need lambda to be very small. Okay, but if you take lambda to be very small, then even the right-handed neutrino is very light, right? So that you can call it sterile neutrino.
Okay, sir.
Any other question? Okay, so now let me turn to a different topic, dark matter. Okay. And the point is there are, of course, many candidates for dark matter. Okay, I'll be discussing one of them mainly. Okay, and another one I'll discuss very briefly. There are many candidates, many types of candidates, right? I shouldn't say many types of candidates. Okay, for example, hidden sector particle is one of them. Okay, there could even be, I mean, hidden sector may be strongly coupled, like UCD. Right? There may be hidden protons and neutron kind of things, right? It need not be just elementary particles. Those are also good enough candidates for dark matter. So all we know from the cosmology. Okay, so cosmology tells us that they are non-relativistic. At the time of structure formation. Okay, which is of course much later in the history of the universe. I have not going to discuss that, right? This is not the part that we're going to discuss. Okay. But roughly the constraint comes from the fact that if they are light, okay, if they are relativistic, okay, then they move around very easily, okay, because they have they travel with the speed of light. Okay. And then that tends to dilute structure formation. Okay, so the matter doesn't clump that efficiently. Okay. So we need really non-relativistic dark matter to have the kind of structure that we see today. Okay, that's all you can see from cosmology. Okay. And this allows for large range of masses. Allows for large range of masses, but given specific models, okay, you can put more stringent bound. Okay. So the one that is most popular, perhaps, is the most popular version. Okay, is what is called the weakly interacting massive particles. Okay, weakly interacting again doesn't mean that it actually can participate in the weak interaction, even though it could. But it's just that the strength is weak interaction strength. These are also called WIMPs. And these were motivated from supersymmetric theories, because supersymmetric theories naturally give rise to particles of this kind. Okay, so that's from the particle physics viewpoint, that's an added bonus that somehow if you have a supersymmetric theory, then these kinds of particles arise automatically. But I'm going to discuss this in a general context, okay, weakly interacting massive particles. So these basically interact with ordinary matter with weak interaction strength. And it has masses of order 100 GeV or so. Okay, otherwise you might have seen it in experiments. The main difference, okay, from the other standard model like standard model particles, okay, is that this one must be stable, or at least have mass of lifetime larger than the age of the universe. Okay. Because otherwise they would have decayed and they would not form the dark matter candidate, right? Then whatever is the decay product, that's what we'll call the dark matter candidate. Okay, dark matter particles. And the fact that they're weakly interacting means that they will decouple early in the history of the universe. In fact, maybe I shouldn't, because they are, in fact, we'll see. Let me not say this at this stage. Okay, we'll see what kind of decoupling this will happen. Okay. So typically, okay, so what is the idea that these particles decouple at some point. Okay. So they decouple at some point. And we have seen that when they decouple, they must be non-relativistic. Okay. Now you may ask why, and the reason is simple. That suppose they are relativistic. Okay, this is, in fact, we have discussed this earlier, but let me do it again. Suppose they are relativistic. Okay, then if you call this, if you denote them by D, right? This is the dark matter particles. Then you would expect that ND is of order n gamma at the time of decoupling. Okay. And after this, they continue to be more or less equal because roughly both fall off as lambda cube. Right? So as lambda increases, n gamma also goes as 1 over lambda cube, because they fall off T cube, right? 1 over lambda cube. Okay. Except that n gamma jumps a little bit when other particles go non-relativistic. Okay, but that's just a factor of orderability. Jumps when some particle goes non-relativistic. But if this is the case, then this means that once these become non-relativistic, then their number still go as 1 over lambda cube. This also goes as 1 over lambda cube. Okay. But then their energy density also start being proportional to 1 over lambda cube. Okay. Whereas the energy density of photon, of course, goes as 1 over lambda to the 4. Okay. That's because each photon is getting, its energy is getting diluted by a factor of lambda, okay, because of the redshift. Okay. So if these were equal, more or less, to begin with, okay, then rhos were also equal, more or less, as long as they are relativistic. Okay. But once these particles goes non-relativistic, okay, then rho d dominates over rho gamma. And this will happen reasonably early in the history of the universe, before the matter radiation equality is supposed to take place. Okay, if you have 100 GeV dark matter, for example, right, then clearly, I mean, it becomes non-relativistic once the temperature falls because 100 GeV, below 100 GeV. And from that point onwards, the universe will start becoming matter dominant. Okay, so this is clearly inconsistent with what you know. So the solution is that rho d to begin with must be much less than rho gamma. So this says that rho d or nd must be much less than n gamma. And this is, we have seen that this is possible if d was non-relativistic at the time of decoupling. Okay. Because if that is a non-relativistic at the time of decoupling, okay, then the densities, okay, if you remember, they fall off as e to the minus m over t, right, md over t. Okay. And this is very small for t much less than md. Okay, so for this scenario, okay, that we described, the weakly interacting massive particles, the dark matter would have decoupled, okay, when it is going non-relativistic. Okay. But of course, we don't want it to be too small, because if it becomes too small, then it will not make up for the observed dark matter density. Okay, so you have to strike a fine balance, right? So for example, if T was MD over 100, right, you'll get a suppression factor of e to the minus 100. Okay, that's too small. So the T cannot be much less than MD either. Okay, and we'll see how to calculate this temperature soon. Are there questions? Okay, so let's now proceed. So as T comes below MD, as T goes below MD, ND begins to fall due to exponential suppression. Okay. And you would expect that ND equal to ND bar, okay, at least roughly, unless somehow ND minus ND bar was created. Okay, this could have been created in the sense that, I mean, this may have just like we calculated NB minus NB bar, it could even be that ND minus ND bar was non-zero because of the B minus L, right? There may be mixing with B minus L that makes ND minus ND bar non-zero, just like NB was non-zero. Okay. But that asymmetry will be small compared to the original number density, at least when T is close to MT, right? Because there ND is roughly equal to N gamma. But we'll make a simplified assumption. Okay, this is not necessary, it just makes life a little easier. So we'll assume that D is its own antiparticle. Because it's a neutral object. So that there is no ND bar and ND, there is no difference, right? Okay, so let me then, so we'll denote, maybe we'll call this N. Okay, just to avoid this having this subscript D every time. Okay. So then as the temperature is falling, as T falls, N gets depleted. Remember that we have already said that dark matter is stable, right? It doesn't decay, or at least it doesn't decay within the lifetime of the universe. So N gets depleted, okay, not by decay, but by these kinds of interactions. Okay, which we'll assume, of course, are all in thermal equilibrium.
Why do we assume this?
Why do you assume what?
That D is its own antiparticle.
Well, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. It's just that, I mean, instead of having to do with two variables, we just do with one variable. Okay? In fact, if you assume ND equal to ND bar, right, then of course the analysis will be more or less the same. Otherwise, you have to take into account possible asymmetry, right? Then if ND minus ND bar is non-zero because of the B minus L, right, that also you have to take into account. But you can certainly do that. I mean, given any microscopic model, you can calculate ND minus ND bar just like you calculated 10B minus L or NB from NB minus L. So this is just a simplification. Okay, it's not necessary to assume this.
Okay.
So, but once you assume that the particle is its own antiparticle, then of course there is a question of having different ND and ND bar. Right? Even if B minus L is produced, it's still that there is only one ND because the antiparticle is not independent.
So by light particles, you mean photon or something else?
It could be photon or anything else. That depends on the reaction rate, right? But this will thermalize, of course, right? Because you are assuming these are in thermal equilibrium. Okay, total. I mean, any light particle, it doesn't matter. Is that clear? Right? The different processes like this will have different reaction rates, right? It could be E plus E minus PR, for example, or Q cubed PR, right? But they will eventually thermalize because they are all in thermal equilibrium.
Yeah, okay. But temperature is still higher than 100, like weak interaction scale.
No, temperature is falling. So basically the point is that we are considering a temperature where it is more or less going through 100 GeV. Okay, or whatever the dark matter mass particle is.
Yeah, this process is through weak interaction though, right?
Weak interaction or weak-like interaction. Indeed, the strength is weak interaction strength, right? It need not be SU3 times SU2 times C1, but the strength is like weak interaction strength. If that's what I mean.
Yeah, okay.
Given any microscopic model, you can calculate this, right? What kind of interactions is responsible for this transition?
Yeah, and these would only happen above a certain temperature.
Well, the rate will fall below a certain temperature. You're going to calculate that rate.
Yeah, okay.
So the annihilation rate per particle. Annihilation rate.
Sir, dark matter particle have charge or not?
Well, no, they cannot have charge really, because if they had charge, right, they'll not be their own antiparticle, first of all, right? And if they have charge, then they have electromagnetic interaction, right? So today, if the universe is filled with dark matter and its antiparticle, then they will decay very rapidly by electromagnetic interaction. Right?
Okay.
This d bar going to gamma gamma, right, will be seen today in today's experiment
Okay, sir.
in the universe. I mean, occasionally like d and d bar may come together and annihilate, right? And those we'll see. So dark matter we assume to be neutral.
Okay, sir. Okay.
But this is an extra assumption that dark matter is its own antiparticle. There may be neutral particles which are not their own antiparticles, right? But this is an extra simplifying assumption that you are making, okay? So that we don't have to worry about this ND minus ND bar difference.
Okay.
The ND minus ND bar difference, you know, it's small, right? It's of course negligible at high energy. But once the dark matter density falls, starts falling, then ND minus ND bar may become significant, right? That's how we had seen earlier. That the fact that the E plus E minus, right, that there is more E minus than E plus, that's irrelevant for high energy. But once the temperature falls below 1/28th of electron mass, right, then that becomes significant, right? Because the actual number of electrons becomes comparable to the difference. So in order not to have to take into account, keep track of that, we are just assuming here that D is its own antiparticle, so that there is no question of having a difference between ND bar and ND.
Okay, sir. Okay. But
this you can certainly take into account, right? This is not something that is, necessary to assume. It's just that to make life simple, you can assume that. And in any given microscopic model, you can see whether this is true or not.
Okay, sir.
So the annihilation rate per particle will be n sigma v. Okay, same formula that we have been using. Sigma is the annihilation cross section. DD going to any light particle. Okay, doesn't matter what light particle it is. V is the relative velocity between the two dark matter particles. And n here is the dark matter particle density itself, because the collision is happening with another dark matter particle. Okay, so D with another D gives light particles. And this typically goes to a constant as V goes to 0, as you had seen. Okay, so you can just treat this as a constant. So let's try to set up an equation. So d dt, the total dark matter particle number of density, number of particles in a co-moving volume, that means d dt of n lambda cube, should be given by minus the number of dark matter particles themselves, okay, because this is per particle. Remember, annihilation rate per particle. So for n lambda cube particle, there will be minus n lambda cube times n sigma v. And then you have to add to that, the positive contribution comes from rate of production from thermal bath. So basically, of course, you are assuming that this thermalizes, okay, because since basically this process is relevant really only when the number of dark matter particle density has reduced, right? Because I know that decoupling, the dark matter particle density must be low compared to the actual number of photons. Okay. So a few particles are produced and we assume that they thermalize.
So sorry, but this sigma has to have a temperature dependence also, right?
Yeah, but the point is that because we are taking the non-relativistic limit, right? So this sigma is really the collision at rest, more or less. See,
But factors like that, if the outgoing particle, the light particles or fermions or some bosons, we'll have that extra fermionic or bosonic distribution factor.
so all of that is included here. Oh, you are thinking of the whether the final state particle is occupied or not.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that you have to include. True, but that effect will be small here. Okay, but yes, indeed. I mean, you have to take into account because you see that at a temperature that is well below the dark matter mass, right? The D plus D will produce. Suppose it's 20 times below the temperature, right? Suppose you are talking at a temperature of T over 20 or MD over 20. Then this is going to produce a particle, okay, of a energy which is MD, right? The light particles will have energy of order MD. And that's way above the temperature. That's about 20 times this temperature. So the probability that the final state particle is occupied, right? That factor, 1 over e to the power something minus 1, right? That factor will be almost 1.
Okay.
Right? So you can ignore that in this process. But you are right that if you do the full calculation, you have to take that into account as well. Okay, that the fact that the final state particles are unoccupied.
Yeah, all right.
Any other question? Okay, so you are going to include this in a few minutes. Okay. But first, let's just ignore this. Okay. And the reason is that for the first approximation, we can say that because we are talking about a temperature that is low enough, okay, that is low compared to MD, the rate of dark matter production for thermal burn actually is low, right? Because the number of photons or number of particles, light particles of that high in energy will be suppressed by some exponential factor. Okay. So to first approximation, you can just include this. You can just work with this and just get an idea of what kind of a result you expect. Okay. Eventually, we'll see how to include this. Okay, because we want to run this differential equation not only at late time, okay, but all through, right? Because you are ultimately trying to calculate what n lambda cube becomes at the end. But just to get an insight, let's just ignore this for the time being, okay, which is a valid approximation at late time, even though not at early time, and see what kind of result we get. So you have d dt of n lambda cube as minus n lambda cube times n sigma v So what we're going to do is that we are going to we basically want to get rid of this n. Okay. So divide by 1 over n lambda cube square. Okay, so that we get rid of this n. Okay. So this gives you d dt of 1 over n lambda cube. On this side, okay, the minus sign there, this gives a minus sign, so that cancels. So here we get this n goes away. 1 over lambda cube times sigma v. And here, if we want to get an estimate, okay, of what's going to happen at late time, we know that in radiation dominated area, lambda goes as some constant times t to the half, right? So this goes as some c to the minus 3 sigma v times t to the minus 3 half. So if we integrate, we see that this gives you 1 over lambda n lambda cube as some constant k plus minus So here is this is a constant, this is a result of integration. And the only thing I want to take away from here is that this approaches a constant as t goes to infinity. Okay. So this means that n lambda cube reaches a constant value. That's constant is what you want to calculate. Is this clear? So this means that the total, eventually, the total density of dark matter particles in a co-moving volume remains constant, which is good, okay? But out of thermal equilibrium is essential for this, okay? Because let's try to compare this with what you will get if we assume that the dark matter was in thermal equilibrium all the time, all this time. Okay, just to contrast this. So, in contrast, if n followed thermal equilibrium formula, then we know that the way n behaves is constant. This we had calculated, right? For non-relativistic case, t to the 3/2 times e to the power minus md over t. So since lambda is proportional to t inverse, we see that n lambda cube will go as constant times t to the minus 3/2 times e to the minus md by t. And t, of course, is goes lambda inverse, which goes as t to the half. Sorry, t to the minus half. Okay. So 1 over t goes as t to the half. So 1 over t goes as t to the half. Okay. So this says that in thermal, if we follow the thermal equilibrium formula, okay, then this falls off exponentially. So clearly, being out of thermal equilibrium is crucial for this. Okay, otherwise you are not going to get any relic dark matter density. Right? If the dark matter density just followed thermal equilibrium formula, it will just be exponentially suppressed. Okay, whereas from this analysis we can see that this decay, because so the physics is that ultimately the thermal equilibrium is maintained by producing the dark matter is being produced by the light particle collision from thermal bath, okay, and dark matter is depleted by collision with itself. Okay, and equilibrium means that the two rates are equal. But we know that the two rates cannot be equal, okay, because the dark matter collision with itself depends on the dark matter density. And the dark matter density is falling off. So at some point, that collision has to fall off, okay, and then the annihilation rate goes down, okay, and that's what is responsible, okay, eventually for the fact that this 1 over n lambda cube or n lambda cube reaches a constant value as t goes to infinity. Okay, because if the annihilation continued as thermal equilibrium will predict, okay, then it will just fall off rapidly. Is this clear? Okay, so let me now describe how to set up the full analysis, okay, taking into account the effect of the thermal bath.
Sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, I just want to clear. Sir, as t tends to infinity means like we are forwarding in time.
Yes,
So, sir, the density of dark matter remains constant always.
will be constant, exactly. Then after decoupling, right, not density of dark matter, but the density of dark matter, the number of dark matter particles in a co-moving volume, that will be constant.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay? So n lambda cube, right? This is the number of dark matter particles in co-moving volume, that will remain constant.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Whereas in thermal equilibrium, that will not happen because the d and its antiparticle, which is itself, they will keep annihilating, and their number density will go down.
Okay, sir.
Sir, could you
Yes.
go back?
Yes, you want to go back here or later, earlier?
Yeah, but the original differential equation is not consistent with n lambda cube constant, right?
Original differential equation is here. Yeah, it's true. But the point is that as you see that n becomes small, right? As n goes to infinity, as t goes to infinity.
Yeah.
That's why this becomes consistent as t goes to infinity limit. See, it is never, so n lambda cube, of course, never reaches its equilibrium value, right? That's the way the differential equation goes, right? So here it's not constant here, right?
Lambda is falling.
Lambda is increasing, right? So n is falling. I mean, you are worried that the right hand side is not zero, right?
Yeah, but the left hand side is also never zero.
Yeah, it's never zero because of this, right?
Yeah,
The
I
n
was
is
thinking.
falling slowly,
Yeah.
but
N
it's
is
falling slowly enough so that even at late time, it reaches a finite value.
yeah, N is depleting, right?
N is depleting. N lambda cube is approaching a constant value.
From above, right? And in the sense that it is higher at any given time than the
Yeah.
constant when it's approaching.
Exactly. Okay. And the physics is clear, and the reason is that it's decreasing a little bit, okay, because some dark matter particles may annihilate, right? Even though the probability becomes smaller and smaller with time, because the actual number dark matter particle density is decreasing.
See, you just said that before this, in the previous slide, we are ignoring the rate of production at later times.
Yes.
But doesn't this mean that at later times it is more relevant?
Well, we'll do the whole calculation now. We'll set up the whole calculation. See, this is exponentially suppressed, right? At later time. Because as temperature is falling, so in order to produce this D from the thermal bath, you need photons or light particles which have energy at least of order md, right?
Yeah, okay.
The number of such particles is exponentially suppressed. It's like e to the minus md over t.
Yeah.
So this rate falls off much faster than this one, right? This is only power law. But that power law fall off is necessary for it to reach an equilibrium value, final constant value, right? If this was not falling off sufficiently fast, then this will get depleted to zero.
Yeah.
See here, for example, right? I mean, we got this t to the minus 3 half. Imagine that this was going as t to the minus half, right? Then when you integrate it, you will get a t to the plus half here. Okay, and this sign will be plus. That will go to infinity as t goes to infinity, right? And that will mean that n lambda cube will go to zero as t goes to infinity. But because of this t to the minus 3 half, right, what it is saying is that this n is falling off sufficiently rapidly, so that even though it looks like that the number is getting depleted, the rate of depletion is falling off sufficiently fast, so that it approaches some fixed asymptotic value, a constant asymptotic value. Is that point clear? Right, but it requires that the rate should be sufficiently fast, right? As I said, that if this was falling off, as if instead of one, suppose lambda was not t to the 1/2 but t to the 1/6, then n will go as 1 over t to the half, right? Because n goes as 1 over lambda cube. Roughly, I mean, as I said, this is just an estimate. I mean, this is assuming that n lambda cube is constant, okay, which we see is a valid approximation at late time here. So unless lambda falls off sufficiently fast, okay, lambda increases sufficiently fast, right? This is good enough for us. Then n will not fall off sufficiently fast, okay, and then this number will continue to deplete. Is this okay? Are there questions? Okay, so let me now tell how the full calculation goes. So in the full analysis, we have d dt of n lambda cube is minus n lambda cube times n sigma v. Okay, here if you want, you can also include that extra factor, the occupancy number factor, plus rate of production. And the rate of production is calculated by using the same detail balance that we have been using earlier. So the idea is that if the system is in equilibrium, then ddt of n cube, neq lambda cube should be 0. Okay, so this is the equilibrium value, assuming no expansion of the universe, etc. So then this is of course rate of production from thermal bath, right? You are just using this equilibrium to calculate this, but then the same result can be used for expanding universe also. So then the rate of production from bath will be given by n equilibrium lambda square times n equilibrium sigma v. So this means that you can write ddt of n lambda cube as minus n equilibrium square, sorry, n square minus n equilibrium square lambda cube sigma v. Is this okay? And as I said, if you had included this occupancy number factor here, that will just get multiplied. Okay? So, but that factor is small enough so that you can ignore it at this stage. So this is a differential equation that you have to solve, and I'll just try to show how to simplify this a little bit, okay, by changing variables. But it should be clear now that if this is known, okay, this is the equilibrium value. I'll write down the expression for this, but these are the value of n at statistical equilibrium. Okay, this is known as a function of temperature. So you can just substitute here and solve this numerically to figure out what this is giving. So n EQ will be given by 2sd plus 1. Okay, this is the spin of the dark matter particle. So this is the degeneracy factor basically. Times 1 over 2 pi square integral 0 to infinity k square dk. And then I'll write this factor e to the power square root of k square plus md square by t minus plus 1 inverse. Okay, this is the same factor that we had, but written in a slightly different term, because you had an exponential minus on top and 1 minus exponential minus at the bottom, right? So the exponential minus I removed from top and put everything at the bottom. And then instead of writing 1 over this, I have just written the inverse. So this I'm going to change variable. Okay. I define k by T equal to Y as usual. And I'll also write T over MD as a variable X. So using this, I'll write this as 2SD plus 1 over 2 pi square T cube, and then integral 0 to infinity y square Ty e to the power square root of y square plus x to the minus 2 . Okay, we got MD over T is x, right? So this is MD, sorry, x inverse. So MD square over T square become x to the minus 2. So this is our NEQ. And okay, so let me do this other analysis. So ddt of n lambda cube. Okay, let me introduce some other variable. So, okay, let me first write this equation, then I'll try to. So ddt of n lambda cube is minus n square minus NEQ square times lambda cube sigma v. Okay. Now we know that lambda is constant over T, right? During that era, this is radiation dominated, right? I'm ignoring the effect of the dark matter particle on the expansion because I'm assuming the dark matter density has already gone sufficiently below. Okay, so that we can use this lambda equal to c by 2. Okay. So this I can also write as ddt of n over T cube as minus n square minus NEQ square 1 over T cube sigma v. Okay. And if I call this u, if I call n over T cube as u, we get du dt as minus, this is, so T cube I'm taking out, so u square minus u eq square and then T cube sigma v. Okay. Where u eq is NEQ by T sorry, NEQ by T cube. Okay. So this you can see that NEQ by T cube u is a function of x, right? Just look at this formula over here. It's, if you divide by T cube, right? So T cube goes here. And then you get this 2SD plus 1. This is just a constant. 1 over 2 pi square is a constant. And then this integral, okay, y is of course a dummy variable. So it just becomes a function of x. Okay. That's how I've written this as ueq of x. Right? It depends on this function. This is a universal function of x. Right? You can calculate once and for all. Doesn't matter or depend on dark matter density, dark matter parameters as such. Okay. So this is the equation that we'll have to try to solve.
Sir, I think on the right hand side, there should not be a factor of T cube in the last equation.
In this equation, okay, let's see. Yeah, see, the point is that u is n over T cube, right? So I have to make it into n cube over T to the 6.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
That's
Yes.
how I have to put this T cube here.
Yeah, yeah.
Are the other question? Is this clear? Okay, so let me write this equation again and then we'll proceed from there.
So could you explain the SD thing?
SD, oh, this is the spin of the dark matter particle.
So, but if we are demanding that it's its own antiparticle and it does not have any, and it's massive, then shouldn't it be a scalar?
No massive photoatomic Z boson, for example, right, is neutral and it's its own antiparticle.
Is it highest spin?
It's spin 1, just like the first one. That, but it's massive, so it has three spin states. So it need not be if the particle is its own antiparticle, then it necessarily have to be a scalar.
All right.
So that kind of massive vectors, yeah. It could be a composite particle also, right? Like nucleus, who knows? Which can have spin.
All right.
Okay. So let me write that equation again. So what was the equation? Du dt is minus du dt is minus u square minus uv square t cube sigma v, right? Okay, so now we are going to try to convert this into an equation in terms of T only. Okay, we could also convert it in terms of T, small t, but it's easier in terms of capital T, the temperature. Okay. So we are going to use the fact that T dot over T is minus lambda dot over lambda in this era, okay, radiation dominated. Okay, so here you are assuming that during this time, no other particle is going to be non-relativistic. Otherwise, this equation will not be true, right? The whole we are assuming that T is proportional to 1 over lambda, right? That's assuming that the dark matter has become sufficiently depleted so that it doesn't contribute to energy density anymore. Okay. And at the same time, it's universal radiation dominated, so no other particle is becoming non-relativistic at this time. Okay. But if that's not the case in your model, you can easily rectify it, right? The equations will become more complicated. Okay, so this is square root of 8 pi g over 3 times rho. This is a Friedmann equation. And rho, let me remind you the formula. It's half AB t to the power 4 times n, where AB is just this constant pi square by 15. And n is the effective number of degrees of freedom. Number of degrees of freedom, which basically is 1 for boson and 7, 8 for fermion. Okay. So let's put all that in. Okay. So using that, we get this formula t dot over t cube, because this is proportional to t square, right? Is this minus equal to minus square root. So this is half. So 4 pi cube gn over 15. Is that clear? So now the idea is that we are going to multiply this. Multiply this by 1 over t dot. By multiplying the left hand side by 1 over t dot, we convert this to du d capital T. So this gives you du d capital T is minus u square minus eq square. So 1 over t dot, right? 1 over t dot is 1 over t cube times this. So 1 over t cube cancels this. So, and this minus sign cancels this minus sign. So this becomes plus. So on this side, it becomes square root of 15 over 4 pi cube gn. Okay, I think I'm, yeah, because 1 over t dot 15 goes on this side, sigma v. And if you want, you can convert this to in terms of x, right? Remember this variable x is equal to t over md. Okay. So let me try to write it here if I can. So du dx, right? The only difference is there will be some t we write at x times md. So this will be u square minus u eq square. This is a function of x only. So here it will be md, I think, right? Md, and then the square root of 15 over 4 pi cube gn. Let me check if I have the. Yeah, I think this is correct. Well, I had a 45. I'm no, this 15. Sorry, this is 45, right? This 3 I forgot. Okay, the 3 times 15 is 45. So this is 45. Okay. 3 also 45. Okay. So in any case, the point is now that this is a known function of x, right? This is some constant, right? These are all constants. N has to be calculated from your microscopic theory. How many particles are non-relativistic? How many particles are relativistic at the time of dark matter decoupling? Okay. So you just calculate this du dx. Okay. So this is a differential equation that you have to solve. Okay. And you solve it with the boundary condition that the boundary condition is that u should be u eq for large x. Then you can easily convince yourself that's a solution to this equation, that if you set u equal to u eq, okay, that's for large x, and then you substitute it here, okay, and start solving it. So the relevant quantity ud is what you get for x equal to 0. Okay. So you basically formally continue this to x equal to 0. Okay, but x equal to 0 here basically means that the large temperature is low enough. Okay, you don't have to go all the way. The temperature is low enough so that the system has u has reached a more or less a constant value. Okay. So this u gives you nd over td cube, right? Because u was n over t cube, right? So you don't really need to know what is td separately, right? Because that's not relevant, right? At what temperature dark matter decoupled, that's not very well defined concept, but the order of magnitude is a well defined concept, of course. Okay. But this one is well defined, right? This is the value of ud that you get as x goes to 0. Okay. So this fixes the Rayleigh density of dark matter. Okay. And in the remaining few minutes, I'll just tell you how to relate it to what we observed today. Okay. So suppose n naught is the observed dark matter density today. Okay. Then we have this equation that n naught over lambda naught cube, sorry, n naught times lambda naught cube should be equal to nd times lambda d cube. Okay, so this is where when the temperature was Td. Lambda naught, of course, is 1. And you also have another equation that lambda d times Td is lambda naught times T naught. Okay. But here there is a factor of k on this side. Okay. What is k? So k tells us the factor by which the photon temperature is enhanced after the dark matter decoupling. And this happens because many particles may go non-relativistic after dark matter has decoupled, right? Like this 11/4 to the 1/3 factor that happened when E plus E minus went non-relativistic. There are similar factors for all the other standard model particles. Okay. But that you can calculate, right? Given any microscopic model, imagine that after the dark matter decoupling, only the standard model particles went non-relativistic, right? Then you can calculate K for each of those standard model particles and put their values together. So K is known. So now using this, okay, we can eliminate lambda. So we see that N naught will be given by ND times lambda d cube. Okay, lambda naught is 1. Here also lambda naught is 1. So lambda d is, so this is ND times, from this equation, lambda d is T naught over K TD. So ND over TD cube is what we calculated, UD, right? So this is UD times T naught over K. Is this clear? So the final formula doesn't really care about what TD was, right? This is of course a ill-defined concept anyway, right? This ratio is well defined. But at what particular temperature the dark matter decoupled, that depends on how exactly we define it. So UD you calculate from this differential equation, okay, as you go to x equal to 0. Okay. And once you have calculated UD, okay, then N naught, that is today's dark matter density, is given by this formula over here. Are there questions?
Sir, could you explain this boundary condition?
This one? Oh, this boundary condition basically follows from the fact that large X means high temperature, right? So at high temperature, the dark matter was in thermal equilibrium. So N would have been equal to NEQ.
Okay, sir.
Right? So that means U is equal to U. So that's the boundary condition.
Okay, sir.
Any other question?
Oh, sir, can we estimate whether dark matter decoupling happens after or before neutrino decoupling?
Well, see, if the dark matter is of the order of 100 GeV, right? Then it has to happen before neutrino decoupling, because neutrino decoupling temperature is 1 MeV, right? So if the dark matter was in equilibrium till then the depletion will be huge, like e to the minus 1000.
Yeah, so wouldn't this also increase T nu?
T nu.
Yeah, because at that time T gamma and T nu are the same.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, but we don't really measure it, do we?
Yeah. So
What?
T nu, yeah. So T nu over T naught is fixed, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you are saying that the T nu will increase, of course, because as the muon decouples, for example, when the muon goes non-relativistic, right? It raises the temperature of the whole bath, which also includes T nu.
Yeah.
Right? So T nu by T0 ratio gets contribution only from the E plus E minus going non-relativistic.
Yeah, okay.
Any other question? Now I should just say that this kind of analysis, okay, is not only for dark matter. Okay, this is a generic kind of analysis, and we can, for example, use this. Okay, the generalization of this procedure. other relic densities, like B minus L, for example, right? We said that suppose you are given this microscopic model, right? The seesaw mechanism, and somebody tells you, okay, here is a model. I give you all the parameters and calculate the relic B minus L. So the way you will calculate is the following: that as t goes below 0, as t falls below, okay, see the mass of the heavy neutrino, then their densities start falling. Now, as long as they are in thermal equilibrium, there is no hope of producing B minus L, right? Because you have already seen that the B minus L cannot be produced in thermal equilibrium. Okay. But at some point, what's going to happen is that these heavy neutrinos, okay, that here it's the collision between nu and nu bar, which will produce light particles, so they get annihilated. But what's going to happen at some point is that the news, that once they start falling out of equilibrium, okay, so once the reaction goes, so you can calculate that. Maybe I should have said that. The same kind of differential equation. Allows us to calculate their relic densities. Their densities, okay? And the physics is that once they go out of equilibrium, once this process is out of equilibrium, okay, which means that the number densities are no longer given by the thermal result, the equilibrium result, okay, which basically means that U differs from UEQ significantly. Okay, that's what this is a sign of thermal being out of equilibrium. Then the decay of the heavy neutrino to lighter particles will produce but of course this requires that the decay, that it prefers one over the other, right? It should. So you calculate the relic density, how the densities of the heavy neutrinos evolve with time. And once that has deviated sufficiently from the equilibrium value, then you also calculate that at what rate they are decaying into lighter particles. Okay, that's and in that decay rate, how much asymmetry is produced. Right, that's important, because if they produce equal amount of B minus L positive and B minus L negative kind of particles, then of course that doesn't help, right? But once you, so it should prefer one side of the other, and that for that we, as you see, we need C and CP violation. So once all the ingredients are in, you can basically set up the differential equation in the same way to see how the heavy neutrino densities are falling, and then calculate their decay rates into lighter particles to figure out how much excess B minus L will be produced. Okay. Now, of course, typically all these calculations have to be done numerically, but this is the general principle by which you can set up the formalism. Okay, how to calculate B minus L for a given microscopic model. Okay, are there questions?
This
I-
capital M, sir,
Yes, go ahead, please.
this capital M still has to be less than the 10 to the 16, right? GeV.
The capital M, yes.
Heavy neutrino mass.
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that's the, I mean, it could be, we don't know, of course, what the heavy neutrino mass is, right? I mean, there's an estimate if the seesaw mechanism is responsible, right? Then you can calculate in some sense, right? Let's do that. So we saw the light neutrino mass goes as what, lambda square v square by heavy neutrino mass, right? So
Yeah.
this is lambda square times 250 GeV square over m square. Right? And if you take m nu, sum of our masses, I think is 0.1 electron volt, right? So let's take a 0.1 electron volt as the, it could be less, okay? But let's suppose 0.1 electron volt, then m, sorry, this is m, not m square. Then m will be like lambda square times 250 GeV square by 0.1 electron volt. Right? So 1 GeV over 0.1 electron volt is like 10 to the 10, right? Because it's 10 to the 9 electron volt. So that's lambda square times 250 square times 10 to the 10 in GeV. Okay, I converted electron volt to GeV. So that's roughly the order that we expect heavy neutrino masses to be. Right? If the seesaw mechanism is responsible for giving the light neutrino mass. Of course, lambda is an arbitrary parameter, but if we assume the lambda is not very small, right, like of the order of the other coupling constants in the theory, then it's 10 to the larger than 10 to the 10 GeV.
This 250 is the vacuum expectation of Higgs.
Yeah, that's right. So V is 250 GeV. Okay, and the point is the MW and MZ, right? These are related to V, of course. Okay, but there are some coupling constant times V. Okay, and this coupling constant is responsible for making this 250 into 80 or 90. Okay, are there other questions?
Sir, I have a confusion which I want to clear. Sir, like you said, when the dark matter dark matter particle become relativistic, then the density like dominate over the gamma density. Sir, my question is that, sir, like we are finding the relic density. So is it possible, like always consider the temperature below the mass of the particle, like a non-relativistic case?
Yeah, so the point is that if the dark matter had decoupled when this is relativistic, right? Because of the, not because its density became low, right? But because interaction became weak, right? Like neutrino, for example, right? Neutrino was decoupled not because it became non-relativistic and its density fell, right? And that's why the annihilation rate went down. But neutrino is decoupled simply because its weak interaction strength, and that weak interaction was no longer enough to establish thermal equilibrium. So if the dark matter had decoupled in that form, then the density, the number density of dark matter particles would be of the order of the number density of photons. Right? Because when they're relativistic, the number densities are of the same order as the number densities of photons. After decoupling, that doesn't change anymore, right? The number density of photons go up a little bit, but not by very much, by factors of order unity. So then once the dark matter becomes non-relativistic, then that energy density start dominating, right? Because once it becomes non-relativistic, then this redshift factor, right, which depletes the energy of each dark matter particle by this factor of 1 over lambda, that stops happening. And that's why the matter densities fall off as 1 over lambda cube and the radiation density falls off as 1 over lambda to the 4. So if the dark matter particle, okay, was say 100 GeV dark matter particle, okay, which decoupled at a higher temperature when it was relativistic, then by the time the temperature goes below 100 GeV, the dark matter will dominate the energy density of the universe. Right? That's the reason why the heavy dark matters of this kind have to decouple when they're non-relativistic, not when they're relativistic. Because if they're non-relativistic, then this number, right, even though you saw that this U was finite, right, UD was a finite number, it's still a small number. And this small number is responsible for why ND over N gamma is small. This you will not have if the decoupling happened at a relativistic point, when the dark matter was relativistic.
Sir, that's true for all other Rayleigh density like B minus L if you want to find out the.
Yes, B minus L, the point there the density is small, right? Not because of the decoupling, but the B minus L, the production of B minus L itself was suppressed. Right?
Okay.
Okay, I mean, you can say yes, maybe for B minus L, okay, let me put it this way. There are two reasons, right? One is that it's coming from the decay of heavy neutrinos, so the number of heavy neutrinos itself could be small, right? Because if they're non-relativistic. But there's another source, which is that this preference over one sign over the other, that could be a very small effect. Right? This number may be large. Okay? Imagine that there is a large number of heavy neutrinos. Nevertheless, when they're decaying, it may decay almost equally to both signs of B minus L. And that depends on what the magnitude of the C and CP violating parameters.
Okay, okay, sir.
So for cases like this, you have to see what, I mean, you have to do the calculation properly in a given microscopic theory. And that will tell you what is possible and what is not.
The procedure will be same, like
The
as we
procedure will
have
be
done
the
for.
same. Yeah, the procedure will be the same. Right? If it decouples when it's relativistic, then of course the procedure will be a little different. Okay? But more or less it's the same procedure.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Any other question?
Sir, I had something different.
Yes.
When we are considering some sort of charge violation, like B minus L violation, we are fine with processes that in a higher theory violate this B minus L conservation of standard model, but we are not fine with the gauge symmetry being broken.
Yes.
Sir, are we okay with Lorentz symmetry being broken in some?
The gauge symmetry, as we discussed, the gauge symmetry is essential for quantizing the theory, right? Because if you break gauge symmetry, then it's not even clear that you have a consistent quantum field theory. So gauge symmetry cannot be broken explicitly.
Can we break some, like, can we create, so we cannot create charge, but can we create something like simply matter out of nothing?
Yeah, you can create matter out of nothing, certainly. B minus L is like that. Okay, matter out of radiation, right? That's what I mean.
No, out of nothing.
Well, that requires quantum gravity, presumably, right? I mean, what do we matter out of nothing? The energy density, I mean, you have to satisfy the energy conservation rule, right?
Yeah, so in some sense, we have to violate the conservation of T mu nu.
But that's
By
also gauge symmetry. This is the point. T mu nu is a charge of gravity.
Yeah, but in standard model, it is not relevant, right?
Well, in standard model, it's not relevant, but since you know that gravity is ultimately there, right? You cannot do something that breaks general coordinate invariance.
Yeah, but like people have, I mean, I've read that people have considered adding a term to the general GR equations, the gravity metric equation, and that term corresponds to some sort of a matter creation.
Those are very hard to make it into a consistent theory, right? Unless you change, see, typically people do classical gravity, okay, if you try to break general coordinate invariance, right? But it's not completely clear that you can make this into a well-defined quantum gravity. Quantum gravity has many problems, right? But if you break the gauge invariance that is underlying quantum gravity, that's underlying gravity, that will add a new layer of problem, right? This we know doesn't even work for normal gauge theories. So it's very hard to imagine that you can get a consistent quantum theory by breaking general coordinate invariance.
By breaking Gage's symmetry in this case, you mean del mu d t mu nu equals 0.
Well, what I mean, that also depends on what exactly is the definition of T mu nu, right? That if it follows from some action, right, the action should be general coordinate invariant.
Yeah, that can happen even with mass creation, right?
Well, it depends on what exactly you mean by mass creation, right? There may be terms in the Einstein's equation which will look like del mu T mu nu is not 0, right? If you add some Riemann square term, Einstein's equation will change, right?
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is that you can redefine your T mu nu by adding that term, and that will be conserved.
Okay.
See, because ultimately, what is T mu nu? I mean, if you write it as R mu nu minus half R G mu nu equal to something, right? That something contains the matter part, but it may also contain anything else that comes from hard derivative terms that you have added to the action, right?
So some sort of implicit derivatives in the definition of T mu nu.
Yeah,
Some
what
addition.
you do, right? But the left-hand side satisfies this fact that del mu on that is 0.
Yeah.
Right? Or d mu on that is 0, right? So it better be the d mu of the right-hand side is 0.
Yeah, but I don't think it shows up in this way in steady state theory that people did in 40s and 50s. I mean, the ones I've read, they directly add a term to this Einstein's equation.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. But the point is you have to make sure that it's consistent with general coordinate invariance.
Invariance is maintained, but they don't talk about field theory as such. So
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That I mean, if you want to have a consistent picture, right, you should have a field theory description.
okay.
So I mean, that's the way we should think of cosmology and particle physics together. That gauge invariance is a sacred principle that you don't want to give up. Right? If you can create matter or whatever, maintaining gauge invariance, that's okay. Right? Then you can ask whether that's physically relevant or not, or whether that's the way nature works. But you shouldn't give up gauge invariance.
And mass also we are calling a gauge sort of charge.
Yeah, in the sense that I mean it's like general coordinate invariance, right?
Yeah, okay.
That you shouldn't give up, whatever you do.
All right.
Any other question? Okay, so I think I have to stop because it's already past 5 past 3. So then we'll meet tomorrow.